Hi, everybody. Glad to have you back. I'm sorry I forgot to record this the other night when we were doing our in-person online study of photo editing in Lightroom and Photoshop. My bad. I apologize for all that. But to be honest with you, I'm glad to be able to have this little session on video. We can make it available to you, and hopefully it will be helpful. We're at least going to cover the basics of things. Don't expect us to go into a lot of detail on fancy stuff tonight. I just really want to equip you with the necessary skills you need in order to edit your photos. You can always build on this, and I promise whatever else that you attempt to do, you will never you'll never give up on these basic skills that you work on right here that we'll talk about today. So you should be able to see my laptop screen. This is the picture is Biloxi Harbor, in case you didn't recognize that. And this is my desktop in Lightroom Classic. Let me say a word about the difference between the various versions of Lightroom that are out now. A couple of years ago, probably, Adobe decided to confuse the world. Lightroom had been around for a number of years, and that's what everybody had gotten accustomed to. And so they decided to come out with a mobile version, an online version kind of thing. And instead of calling it Lightroom Online or Lightroom Mobile, they decided that the new product would be called Lightroom. And the one that had been around for years would no longer just be Lightroom, it would be called Lightroom Classic. So if you see a program that is referred to simply as Lightroom, then chances are you're talking about one of the mobile versions. Now, the problem with the mobile versions is that they simply do not have all the tools that Lightroom Classic does. And so I use Lightroom Classic, and if you're serious about doing photo editing, I think Lightroom Classic would certainly be what you would want to use. Lightroom Mobile is great. You can edit on your tablet, on your phone, that kind of stuff, and save it in the cloud and all of that newfangled stuff. And that's great. But if you really want to get into some serious photo editing, you really need the tools in Lightroom Classic. The first thing that you might notice is that the order of sections over on my right-hand side is probably different from yours, and that's on purpose. I have rearranged these. And a couple of reasons. Number one, it fits my workflow, probably the main reason. But beyond that, I do believe there are a couple of things that you need to do first before you do anything else in editing a photo. And I have moved those to the top of the list. Now, if you want to do that, make note of how mine are organized from top to bottom. It's lens correction, transform, basic, calibration, HSL, tone curve, detail, color grading, and then effects. And the way that you do that is you left click over here on just an empty space down toward the bottom, and this little menu pops up, and what you want is to choose customize develop panel. You click on that and you get this little pop-up, and here are the sections arranged, and all you have to do is hold your mouse down on one of those and just move it, and it will that easily swap things around. Now you get them the way that you want to, and then you have to hit save. And if I remember correctly, it requires a Lightroom reboot. So I'm not going to save that, just save a couple seconds. But that's the way you do it. And then when you come back, all of your sections will be reorganized into this sort of fashion. So let's just kind of take a look around the desktop here to see what we're working with. At the top, you've got a little nameplate thing that you can change. I've got my built-in photography up there. You across here, you've got some other sections. Library is definitely one that you will use quite frequently. Here's where you will import stuff. You can uh, tag your photos with keywords and things of that nature to keep up with them, search for them more easily. And then, of course, the develop module is where we do most of our work in editing photos. And honestly, I don't use any of the rest of this stuff. It may be something that you're interested in, and if so, I'm sure you can go to Adobe, and there's probably some training on what these are and how you use them. It's just not for me. So library and develop really are the only two tabs that I find useful. You've got at the top right your histogram. That will come in handy. You need to learn how to read a histogram. It's not all that hard, but it can tell you a lot of stuff about your pictures. And when you're editing, it really is helpful to take a look at it every now and then and see what's going on. On the left-hand side, right in the middle, on the edge, is a little triangle. And if you get close to it, another panel pops out. And this is where you have presets and snapshots and history and collections, all that kind of stuff, and a navigator panel. This is helpful if you use presets. A lot of people like them. I have a bunch of presets. I don't often use them, but I do use them occasionally. But let me say a word about presets. It's good to remember that when somebody develops a preset, it's based on a photograph that was taken in a certain place at a certain time with certain lighting and certain atmosphere and a whole lot of other variables. And they came up with a bunch of settings that they changed around to make their picture look exactly the way they wanted it to look. And then they saved those settings as a preset. And a lot of times they'll come up with, variations on the theme, a lot of presets with a similar look, with a little something a little bit different between each one. And then they'll put that in a package and sell it to people like you and me. And that's fine. I'm not opposed to that at all. But the warning that I would give you is that you just have to remember a preset was not made based on your photograph. It was made based on the other fellow's photograph. And so the lighting, the atmosphere, the colors, there's just a whole lot of stuff that that might be different from your photo. And so you can find some presets and you go, oh man, those are really nice photos. I like the look of that photo. This is terrific. So I'm going to buy these presets and use them on my photos. And then you get them on your computer and you try to use one, and somehow it just doesn't look like the other guy's photo. But don't be too surprised. It's a preset made on the other guy's photo, not yours. So a preset might work, or it might not work. So just be careful and don't be too disappointed. You need, if you're going to go buy presets, you need to find somebody who's done presets on pictures that look similar to the ones that you take, and you can at least have a better chance of being in the ballpark in that case. Most of the time, I keep that one closed simply because it gives me a little more real estate to work with. And then, of course, down across the bottom, you've got the film strip. This is all the pictures that are in this particular folder that we're looking at. And it's great to browse. You can rate them. You can click how many stars you want to rate this picture. You can do all that right here. You can apply some filters to help you sort through all these things. But this is the folder that you're working in. And if you click various pictures, then those pictures are the ones that show up. Most of the time, as I'm working, after I select a picture, I'll also close that one down as well. And again, it's simply because it gives you a little more real estate, a little bigger picture view of your pictures as you are editing. All right, let's kind of get into this stuff. On the right-hand side, again, histogram at the top. Then right here across this upper tab, there are some icons, and these will be some other editing tools. We'll get to these a little bit later, but just be aware that they're there and they represent some other tools that you will find pretty handy. Down the right-hand side, each one of these sections, if you click on it, will open up, and this is where you will do most of your work. So let's begin with lens correction. I think this is the first thing that you need to do before you do anything else. Just makes sense to me that you don't get too far into this thing before you apply your lens corrections. The first thing you want to do is just check chromatic aberration. Your picture may or may not have any. Doesn't really matter. If it's not there, it won't bother a thing. If it is there, it will remove a lot of chromatic aberration. Maybe not all of it. It kind of depends on your lens, your camera, and a lot of other things. But it will be at least very helpful. And most of the time, it will remove enough that you will barely notice any that's left. The other one is enable profile corrections. And just click this one. I would encourage you to watch the screen as I click this little checkbox here. You notice something happened to the screen. It sort of flattened out. The vignetting around the edges went away. It's because this lens that I used to shoot this picture, it happens to be a Nikon 24-120. The profile for this lens is in Adobe's database, and it automatically applies the corrections that this lens needs in order to make the picture look like it's supposed to and not have to just be stuck with the distortion that comes with this particular lens. All lenses have something that probably needs to be fixed a little bit. And unless you're using a really old lens or maybe some off-the-wall third-party lens, chances are the lenses that you have will be in Adobe's database, and you click that little checkbox and it will be automatically applied. It is possible, and I've got a lens or two that this is the case with. I check that box and nothing happens. And so what you have to do is go down here to the first box, click, and the menu will drop down, choose the lens manufacturer, go to the second box, click, another drop down box appears, and you can just scroll through and find your lens if it's in there. If it isn't in there, then what you can try is you find a lens made by the same manufacturer that's very close to the lens that you took your picture with. So if you took a picture with let's say a 40 millimeter lens, and you couldn't find that lens in the database, but you could find a 35 millimeter lens, well, you might try the profile for the 35 millimeter and just see. It might come close enough where any distortion would be negligible and you wouldn't notice it too much. So give it a try. But most of the time, you're going to click that and your lenses will automatically be corrected. Okay, so two little check boxes in that section. The next one is transform. This one opened up, and here, although there's a whole lot of stuff in here, I would encourage you to focus just on one button, and it's called Auto. And again, you watch the screen as I click on this little box. And you might have noticed a slight shift. What it does is it helps straighten things out, makes things level, improves the perspective. So if you take a picture of the Gulf of Mexico and all your water is running downhill to the left or to the right, you click that one little button and chances are the program will level out your Gulf of Mexico for you. If it's a building, and sometimes, when you're close to a building and you take a picture of it, the perspective is just off and it kind of looks like it's fallen away from you or something. And so you click this button and it can help straighten up your building. So, you give this a try. It won't fix every picture. Sometimes you click it and it does weird and odd things. And so if that happens, click the off button, turn it off, and just ignore it. If you want to get real deep in the woods, you can learn how to play with all this stuff. I have found it to be extremely difficult to use. Mostly it's not worth wasting time on. And frankly, if you do a good job of taking your photo and getting it right as you take the photo, you won't need much of this at all. But most of us have a hard time looking through the viewfinder and being perfectly level or perfectly straight. And so this comes in pretty handy. It's very helpful. Next comes the basic tab, and this is where most of our work is done. The upper part of this has to do with the getting your white balance correct. Honestly, again, even if you use auto white balance, I think most of our modern cameras do a pretty good job of getting the white balance like it's supposed to be. From there, we can manipulate it a little bit. If you want it a little cooler, you move it to the left or the blue. If you want it a little warmer, you can move it to the right toward the yellow. You can apply a little green tint or a little magenta tint, what appeals to your eye. If you don't want to do all that, then there's this little eyedropper tool right here. You can click on the eyedropper tool, and then the challenge is to find something that is close to middle gray in your picture. Probably that might be a little dark. That's about the same, but honestly, that might be, well, that's pretty close right there. So let me get it right there and click on that. And you notice that what it did is it slightly warmed up my picture. It shifted the temperature just a little bit to the right, toward the yellow from where it was originally. And I kind of like that. It was an afternoon shot, and so the light probably needed to be a little warmer than it was. So that's how you correct for your white balance. The next two sliders, exposure and contrast, you might be tempted to just start off right there. Let me encourage you not to do that. Save these sliders for later. Again, assuming that the picture that you took is somewhere close to correct, the exposure is close to correct, I would say save these for later. Instead, move down below to the highlight, shadows, whites, and blacks sliders. And so as I look at this picture, what would I want to do with this to make it a little bit better? Well, I might want to move the highlights to the right a little bit. Now, as I do that, look at the histogram as I'm sliding this slider back and forth. Now, I'm moving it to the right, so what you should expect is that the histogram is moving toward the right side, meaning that it's getting brighter. So I kind of like that. I think it needs to be just slightly brighter. How about the shadows? Well, I kind of like the shadows where they are. The shadows look pretty good in this picture, so I might be tempted just to leave that alone. But the whites and the blacks, now this enables you to set the white point and the black point in your picture. Basically what we're talking about is getting as much tonal range in your picture as possible without either crushing the blacks or blowing out the whites. And the way that you do this is that you hold down on Windows, it's the Alt key, and on a Mac, I think it's the Option key. Hold that button down and then slide this slider. And as you move this slider to the right, you may begin to see some things begin to appear. Well, you don't want to see that with the white slider. So what we want to do is move it back to the left until those white dots just barely disappear. Right there. Now, what I've done is set this so that we've got whites as bright as they can be without being blown out. Now let's do the same thing with the black slider. You hold the Alt or the Option key down. We're going to move to the left a little bit. And as we move to the left, again, you begin to see some color come through. You probably don't want that much, so move it back to the right. The difference with this one is with the black slider, it's usually okay to leave just a little bit of the blacks showing. It's fine. And so what we've got now is a histogram that goes all the way from the left edge where the darks are to the right edge where the lights are. And still, we haven't got anything blown out. Now, you can turn on these little triangles at the top, one above the shadows and one above the highlights. And what it will do is show you if anything is indeed either crushed if it's black or blown out if it's white. Well, sure enough, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you see a little blue showing up there. And that shows us the little spots that we had when we moved the black slider. And that's okay. It's not much, and it's not going to hurt a thing. So that's fine. Tells us a lot. It doesn't appear that we've got any whites blown out. But since I've got the little thing turned on up there, let me move this white slider and watch what happens. I'll watch for the boats and watch for the clouds and where there's a lot of white in the picture. And as I move this to the right, we're going to start seeing some red show up. Look at that on top of those boats on the right-hand side. What we've just done is we've just blown out our whites. There's no more detail in there. And if we keep going, we not only get the boats, we start getting the clouds. There's just no detail left in that picture at all. Way, way, way too bright. So let's move it back down. And I think we had it on about 23 right there. That's pretty good. And that's as bright as the whites need to get without being blown out. And you notice we haven't moved the exposure or the contrast button at all. We've focused all of our movements right here in this section. We can then go down to the presence, as Lightroom calls it. I like that word. I'm probably about as good a word as you can find. These three sliders, texture, clarity, and dehaze, actually function pretty much like contrast. They will affect the contrast of your picture. I can never remember exactly how it works. One of them deals with the large stuff, one deal with middle stuff, and one deals with fine detail. So large detail, middle detail, fine detail, that's kind of how this works. But texture is an easy one to show you. It really does a good job on anything that's hazy. Sometimes you take a picture down here on the Gulf, we got so much moisture in the air. If you take a picture, it just looks like there's fog when there's not really any fog. The cameras will catch that pretty easily. And same with the sky, some misty clouds, that kind of thing. If you move the dehaze slider to the right, it clears all of that stuff up, and it can make your blue skies a little bit bluer. But if you'll also notice, since I still have those little things turned on up there at the histogram, as I move the dehaze slider to the right, what's beginning to happen to my shadows? I'm getting a lot of crushed shadows in here. Why is that? Well, because dehaze is actually affecting the contrast in this picture. So it is increasing the difference between things that are light and things that are dark. So you may not want to move that quite that much. As I said, shadows are not quite as bad to crush, at least a little bit, than whites are, but we might want to move that dehaze back somewhere around there. And it still leaves us with a little bit of crushed black down here, but that's not going to hurt anything in this picture. Same thing with texture and clarity. I like clarity, but again, rule of thumb is use these sliders judiciously. In other words, the lesser that you can move them, probably the better. One of the mistakes I see people do with clarity is, man, they crank that clarity way up. Now, if you do that, just be aware, if you move your slider all the way to the right, it's going to make your picture look, the word is crunchy that a lot of people use. It's just overdone. But I also see people moving the clarity back to the left because they don't want to do that. So they end up with these soft, mushy pictures. And I know some folks, they like that kind of stuff, but honestly, I think it messes up your picture. So rather than go from one extreme to the other, learn to use them, but use them just enough to get the effect that you want. This particular picture, I don't think even needs any texture, but you can play with that and see what happens. The next two are vibrance and saturation. I would say of the two sliders, I would encourage you to try using vibrance first before you use any saturation. I know people like overly saturated pictures, all these bright colors and everything. I get it. But just trust me on this. That's easy to overdo. And if you want your pictures over the long run to really look the best, then the minimum amount of this stuff is probably the best. But move vibrance some and you can make your colors jump a little bit, but it won't be nearly as much as if you moved saturation slider. So just use vibrance and then use it carefully. And then if you need to, you can come back up to exposure and contrast. I would say in this picture, if you added contrast, you'd be adding something that it doesn't need. It doesn't really even need exposure, but you could lighten it up a little bit. But really, I'm going to show you in a few minutes what you can do to this picture without ever moving this exposure slider. Just be aware that exposure is going to brighten the entire picture, and that's not necessarily something that you want to do. So just hang on to that. All right, we'll close the basic tab and we go to the calibration tab. This one's interesting. I went for ages, never used this calibration tool at all. Pardon me while I take a sip of coffee. Mainly because I didn't understand it, couldn't figure it out. And so therefore, if you don't understand something, it's very difficult to use it correctly. But here's the best way to understand what this calibration section does. Every pixel in your photograph is made up of a combination of red, green, and blue. And so to produce any particular color, it's a mathematical formula to come up with that particular hue or that particular luminance, whatever. It's just a bunch of red, green, and blue. But every pixel in your picture. So if you're looking, for example, over here at this blue roof on top of the Harbor Masters building, Every pixel in that blue roof is made up of a combination of red, green, and blue pixels. The tan building is also made up of a combination of red, green, and blue pixels. This blue sky is made up of a combination of red, green, and blue in each of the pixels. This dark building over here is, believe it or not, every pixel represented in that building is made up of a combination of red, green, and blue pixels. So what does that have to do with calibration? Well, in this particular section, you can adjust or manipulate either the hue of the red, green, and blue pixels or the saturation of the red, green, and blue pixels. And what we're talking about is the red, for example, the red pixels, the red combination in each of those pixels, in every pixel in your photograph. So it's not just red, okay? It affects everything. Since this blue also has some red in it, it's possible that by moving the red slider, you'll also affect the color in that blue roof. The one that seems to have, at least in my photos, the one that seems to have the greatest impact, regardless of what I try it on, is this blue slider. So when you move the blue, just watch what happens. You may have to look carefully at this. But you may notice that one of the things that happens is not just that the blue sky gets bluer, but the yellow gets richer. The yellow gets richer by moving a blue slider? Yep. Why? Because yellow contains some amount of blue in each of the pixels. So you can try this on your pictures. It's often it's a wonderful way in a lot of pictures to enhance, enrich, make your colors without overdoing things. And it doesn't necessarily take a whole lot. Like everything else, do it in moderation. And what you may find is that manipulating these sliders, it will make the colors in your picture just richer, more full-bodied. It's very difficult for me to come up with a word that aptly describes what's happening, but that'll probably do it. And so that's the calibration slider, and the best thing to do is play with that. I seldom move the hue sliders. I'm just perfectly happy to let red and green and blue be red and green and blue. But you can try this too. You might try moving the blue hue slider and see what happens to your picture. It's absolutely worth experimenting with just to see what happens. And then, of course, is the HSL section. This stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. Hue is what color is it? Saturation is how much of that color is it? And luminance is how bright is that color. And so here, the difference between HSL and calibration, you're not manipulating every pixel in the picture. You're really only manipulating the color red in your picture, or the color orange, or the yellow, or the green. Now, what's interesting is, and you may have noticed this, one of the things that really fakes you out sometimes is, you've got some green trees, for example, and you're trying to maybe go to luminance and you're trying to brighten them up, and you move the green slider and nothing happens. But then you move the yellow slider and suddenly it looks exactly the way that you want to. And the reason for that is simply it fakes our eyes out. But trees and grass and lots of plants like that actually have a lot more yellow in them than might be noticeable to our human eyes. One of the other ways that you can do it, and let me just zoom in here, and we'll use the roof of this building as an example. If you're not real sure what color something is, there's this little tool right here. I put it on hue, for example. And then we click on this little tool, and then we go over to this roof, and I'm just going to click and hold my mouse button down on this roof, and now I'm going to move it up. Now, do you see what's happening? It's not just blue, it's aqua and blue. So it's a combination of aqua and blue. So if you wanted to do the best job possible of adjusting the color of that particular roof, then you would need to move both of those sliders and not just one of those sliders. So it's interesting. It's a very good way to figure out what color something is, as opposed to the little canopy on this boat down here. If I put that on there and move it, guess what? That is blue. So very interesting. It's a good way to figure out what actual color you're dealing with in a photo, because sometimes it's hard to look at it and know. So make use of the tools, and it can be very helpful to determining colors. So again, you can adjust the hue. This red, you can change what kind of red it is, what kind of orange it is. You can change the saturation. How much of this red do you want to tone down? You want to. I took a picture recently of a young lady wearing a red dress, and the picture was great. But man, that red dress was it was just almost punching you in the nose when you looked at it. And so when I reduced the saturation on the red, it didn't get rid of the red. What it actually did was enable me to see the detail in the material of that red, which you couldn't see because the overly saturated red, as my camera took the picture, was making actually made the dress look kind of unreal. So when I reduced just a little bit the saturation on that dress, it actually looked better. You can use luminance to increase the brightness of a particular color in your picture. And sometimes that's a great way to make something stand out, or to reduce the luminance in something that is a little too bright that you don't want so much attention drawn to. Then we come to the tone curve. I will tell you the red, green, and blue. Um, Here, I don't use these at all in Lightroom. If I wanted to do something with this, I would do it in Photoshop. I just think Photoshop does a better job. But there are two sections here that are sometimes helpful. This is called a parametric curve. This is called a point curve. Basically, the difference is with parametric curve, you're moving a whole section of things, and with the point, you're moving a single point on the line. But this is a good way to either brighten a section, or maybe if you have something too bright, bring it down a little bit. You can make an S curve out of this, which is a great way to add contrast to a picture. Play with that. It's just one of those things that comes in very helpful. Below that then is the detail section. Here we're talking about sharpening stuff, and below that is the noise reduction. Let's just deal with noise reduction first. If you shoot at ISO 100 out in the daylight, you're just not going to have any noise to worry about. You can shoot ISO 200, ISO 400. You could probably shoot ISO 800 on almost any modern digital camera, and you're not going to have a whole lot of noise. If you do, all you have to do is take this slider and move it to the right. But again, move it judiciously, because if you move it too far, you will begin to make your picture look muddy and you lose detail. So you only want to use as much as is necessary to minimize the effect of the noise in the picture. And I would probably say some people get way too worried about noise. Noise back in the older days was otherwise known as film grain, and every film had some kind of grain to it. And in fact, a lot of photographers would choose their film to shoot with depending on what they were shooting, because they like the particular grain of that film. If you're doing black and whites, um, grain can be wonderful. A little bit of noise can be helpful. So don't think that every picture has to be totally noiseless. That's not true. You really only want to be able to handle stuff that begins to detract from your photographs. Um, Color is another kind of noise, and honestly, you can usually move this color slider more than you can move the luminance slider. But again, you only need to move it to get rid of stuff, and once you have minimized it, stop. There's no sense going overboard on either one of those. Sharpness, on the other hand, is kind of another thing. Um, Sharpness, let me back out of there. Uh, Usually, Lightroom will add a default amount of plus 40 to sharpening. This is kind of where every picture that you have in Lightroom, this is where the sharpness slider will be. Now, if you shot a nice sharp picture with a good sharp lens, you might not even need any help from Lightroom. So it's possible that you would even reduce the amount of sharpening. But for a lot of people, they want a little more, so you can move this slider up. Again, you can move it quite a ways. I would hesitate going much over about 100. Um, you can try higher depending on your picture. I don't do much at all with radius and detail. Very seldom do I ever move these two sliders here. However, the masking slider is another thing. And this is another one where the Alt key comes in handy. You hold the Alt key down, and as you begin to slide this little thing to the right, you'll notice some stuff happening with the photograph. Now, what's happening is this. Everything in white is being sharpened. Everything that's black is not being sharpened. And honestly, there are some things you don't want to be sharpened. Sky doesn't need to be sharpened. Water generally doesn't need to be sharpened. What you want sharp are edges and outlines and things of that nature. So we move the masking slider all the way over until only those things that honestly need to be sharpened have some white showing on it. And we let it go. And now the sharpness is only applied to where we had those white edges. This is the problem that I had earlier when I was trying to record this. My poor little computer is trying to keep up with everything, and I think I may be taxing it just a little bit. I'm going to bring that back down to normal and hopefully work from there. And that's detail, which gives you sharpening and noise reduction. Below that is color grading. This is another relatively new feature with Lightroom. It was added, I don't know, a year or two ago. Can't remember now. Been around for a little while now. And it's okay. I don't get real excited about this, and maybe it's because I've done color grading, but I do it a totally different way, and I do it in Photoshop. And It just seems to me to be easier than this is. But basically, you can add some color toning to the midtones or the shadows or the highlights or all three if you want to, or two. Often it's two highlights and shadows. But for example, if you wanted to maybe produce a little cinematic look to a picture, then you come down here to the shadows and you grab this little thing in the middle, hold your mouse button down, and just move it slightly to the desired color. And if you know anything about movie color toning, you'll probably realize that a lot of movies have some teal in the shadows. And so that's what I just did. I added a little bit of teal. The more you move that toward the outside, the more of the color that is added. Closer to the middle, the less color is added. And of course, you can move it all around the circle, pick whatever color that you so desire. You can also do the same thing. Often teal and orange, I believe, are kind of movie type things. So if I move this one this way a little bit, that's definitely a movie color grading to this particular photograph. Again, you can play with this, see what you like. You can manipulate it in various ways. I would rather do it in Photoshop. I just feel like I have greater control over things in Photoshop, but that's another lesson for another day. And then beyond that is effects, and basically this is vignette and grain. And we go, grain? I thought we had that noise reduction to get rid of grain. Well, we did, but trust me, some pictures can benefit from the addition of a little bit of grain. I would say, especially if you're going to do some black and whites. Black and white photos often benefit tremendously from at least a little bit of grain. It can really add to the picture. But the vignette, if you move it to the left, you get a dark vignette. If you move it to the right, you get a white vignette. This is another one of those things that less is more. So instead of doing this, unless you're going for some kind of artistic purpose, instead of that, I would say more like that. That's a very slight vignette applied, and yet it will bring the view in toward the middle of the picture. So less is better, as with most all of these things. And those are the main tools that you will use. Now, I mentioned across this top there are 4 other things to check out. This first one is the crop tool, and you click on that one, you get this little tool that pops up, little menu thing. There is this one can come in handy if you don't want to use the transform method of straightening things up. You can use this angle. You click on this, you find something that needs to be straight across, you click, drag your mouse, let it up, and it will straighten things for you. Just draw along. If you've got a horizon that needs to be straight, for example, draw the line along the edge of the horizon, and that's how that works. Beyond that, this is mostly what you will probably do. So click on the crop tool, and there are some kind of basic choices here. 16 by 9 is a good choice. It's sort of it gives a picture kind of a panoramic look. It's not really panoramic, but it kind of has that appearance. So somehow I don't want that. Okay, there we go. I'll take my crop and let's move it down to like there, and then we close it to apply it, and there is our 16:9 crop applied to our photo. The next little thing is the spot removal tool. So if you click on that, it brings up a couple things. Usually you'll have it on heal. Sometimes you might want to try clone, but most of the time heal works. Now here's how this can become helpful to you. And I don't really have anything in this picture that I need to remove. However, there's some stuff I can play with. We open up our little tool here and we get this little brush. And we put our brush over the whatever that little dark thing is right there next to the 14. If I want to remove that, I just hold my mouse button down and paint over it, let the mouse go. And Lightroom is going to try to pick a spot. Well, it happened to pick a spot out in the water for some reason. Who knows why? Well, I don't want that spot because I think we can pick a better spot. So if you put your mouse over the spot that was chosen, hold the mouse button down and just slide it around and move it, you can find a to replace that one with. And so if we wanted to do this one here, again, we just kind of paint over it. And Lightroom selected a pretty good spot this time. And that's how you do it. You can remove a lot of stuff that way. It does not work nearly as well as some of the tools in Photoshop, but for easy removal stuff that isn't too close to other things, it does a pretty good job. So close that out, and there we are. All our little dark things have disappeared. This is the red eye correction tool. My best advice to you is learn how to shoot with off-camera flash. And if you will do that, you won't have any red eye problems to deal with. But in the event that you do, you can click on this one, take the little brush tool that shows up, put it over the person's eye, click on it, and pretty much that's all you have to do. This last one is much more complicated, and I got to wait on my computer to catch up with me again. It opens up a section where several things are available. And let me see, I had trouble with this one time before about this at this point in making a video. My computer resources are being stretched to the limit, but we're going to hang in here and hope that it will let us continue. For whatever reason, once I do this, it's hard to get back to where I want to be. There we go. All right, let's see if we can try this again. In this section, when it pops up, you've got select subject, select sky, you've got a brush tool, a linear gradient, a radial gradient, color range, luminance range. There's a depth range, but I think depth range only works with certain kinds of photos, and I can't remember what it is, but otherwise it'll be grayed out and basically will be unavailable to you. But these tools are pretty handy, and this is what I said earlier when I said, hold on, I'll show you a different way to add a little pizzazz to your picture. We can take a radial gradient, for example. Click that, this little thing comes up here. This is your new mask. And all you need to do, if we wanted to brighten up this area of the picture, for example, and we're going to come in here, we're going to draw an oval in this case, kind of get it where we want it, and we can spin it so that the direction goes the right way. Might make it just a little bit bigger. Place it right about there. And now you've got all of these things that you can use to manipulate that mask and only that mask where the red is showing up. So if I increased or brightened the shadows just in that area, slide the shadow slider to the right, then it will brighten that area and only that area where we applied the mask. We can do it again, create another one, get another radial gradient. If we wanted to brighten up this dark middle section of our photo, and we can kind of stretch that out that way. And again, I'm just going to brighten the shadows a little bit. And it's very gentle, and it hasn't made a huge difference, but it's made some difference. It enables us to see into that area of this picture just a little bit better. So that's how you would do that, and you can use any of these tools that way. And if you've ever drawn a radial gradient, you know how that works. The subject works well sometimes with people trying to select the person in a picture. It's great, and if you do it that way, you can either use the mask to adjust the person, because that's where the mask has been applied, or when you first make the mask, you can come up here and choose to invert the mask. And so if you say select subject and it selects the person in the picture, if you invert it, then the mask will be applied to everything else except the person. So it's a great way to adjust the background, for example, behind an individual. So all of those are very useful. You just have to play with them. Okay, for the sake of this video, we are not going to go to Photoshop, but let me just tell you how to go find this same stuff in Photoshop. And once you're there, I think what you'll see is that it's very similar to Lightroom. But you would open up a photo in Photoshop. The first thing that you would do is duplicate your background layer. And the reason you do that is because Photoshop sometimes will end up doing some destructive editing, and you duplicate that layer and save that background layer, so you can go back and delete everything if you want to later on, except for that background layer, and you still have your original photo. Be that as it may, you duplicate the layer, go up to the top, and you will, well, I can show you where it is, but we're not going to do a whole bunch with Photoshop. There we go. You would go up to filter. Now, I don't have a picture open, which is, let me go back and I'll at least send a picture over there. So, all right, we go photo, edit in Adobe Photoshop, and this creates a TIFF file out of your original raw file and sends it over to Photoshop. And sometimes it takes a few seconds for that to happen, especially on my computer, since I'm about taxing it out this afternoon. We'll give it a few seconds here and hope that it works. You ever feel like singing the Jeopardy song while you're waiting on stuff to happen? Yeah, maybe it's going to go over there. I don't know. Maybe not. Well, at any rate, you would select filter, and then you would go down to camera raw filter. Ah, wait, here it comes. Boy, it took its time, didn't it? Anyway, go to filter, and then right here to camera raw filter, and you would click on that, and that is going to bring up camera raw inside of Photoshop. And when it finally opens up for us, I think what you will notice is while it looks somewhat different, basically it has the same appearance as Lightroom. And you can go in and continue to do your editing here. In fact, you can do it all in Photoshop if you want to, and a lot of people do. I just find Lightroom, especially for folks who are just getting started in photo editing, Lightroom, it's not that it's better, but it's in some ways it's easier. And one of the big things is that it will not let you do destructive editing, which to me is a huge deal for people who are just getting started in this stuff. So that in a nutshell and in a blitz is how to do editing in Lightroom Classic and Photoshop. And I would say if you can get these skills down, they actually transfer to almost every other photo editing program that I've ever seen. And in fact, I can't think of one that it would not help you with. It may work a little bit differently, and it may look a little different the way they have it laid out, but things mean the same. I mean, exposure is the same, contrast is the same, dehaze is the same. So if you can get it here and understand it in Lightroom, the skills that you develop here transfer over should you ever desire to use any other editing program as well. Okay, so that's going to be it for today. I really appreciate those of you who attended the in-person class the other night. I hope that was helpful to you, and if you missed it, I hope that you were able to watch this video and get a little something out of it as well. We did do a bit more the other night, but I think that this was the gist of it, and maybe a little bit shortened, but I think we got most of the important stuff in. So thanks again. Let me remind you, this little video is being made on what's today? March the 1st. Oh, March the 1st, Tuesday, March the 1st. So we have a group shoot. I'm sorry, we're having a lighting workshop coming up next week on March the 8th. If you're interested in that, check out the events tab on the Mississippi Gulf Coast Photography Club Facebook page, and the information and details about that will be found there. Later on in the month of March, we're having a group shoot at Hickory Hill Country Club and Golf Course. And if you've never been to a group shoot, come on out and join us. It's a lot of fun. Get to hang out with a bunch of photographers. We'll try to have some models who will make our pictures look better for us. It's just a lot of fun. If you're new to photography, you can come and learn some stuff. If you're an old pro at this thing, come out and share your knowledge and skills with people who are just getting into this thing. Helping each other is what it's all about, and we have a great time doing it. So once again, thank you very much. I appreciate all of you taking part in this. We'll have more classes coming up soon, so stay tuned. Keep watching. We'll get information out about all of these. And by the way, if you want the best way to keep informed about events in the Mississippi Gulf Coast Photography Club, Best way is not only to be a member of the Mississippi Gulf Coast Photography Club, but also send me a friend request. And that way, when I host an event, you will automatically get an invitation to it. And you can either sign up and come or you can ignore the invitation, whatever suits your fancy. But at least it's the easy way to be informed. So just look for me, send me a friend request. I'd love to have all of you on board. Y'all take care. See you sometime real soon.